their own internal Siri had just not been able to keep up with what people were asking of and demanding of their phones. And so they were saying, okay, well, we saw the demo of ChatGPT from OpenAI, and that's what we want to do. And remember, when that demo came out, aside from all the Scarlett Johansson controversy that got the headlines, was a sense that Siri was really plan B, plan C, plan D at this point and
Yeah.
needed to be upgraded.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
I am well. Hello.
Any hot stories?
Yeah, we heard from the biggest, most important stock in the world, right? I mean, and
Yeah,
yet
yeah.
the world.
I thought of you as I listened to the news because, sometimes you can do your absolute best and still not make people happy. And I was struck that you said when you're on top of the pile in business, you not only have to be great, you can't make a single mistake. And I mean, look at Nvidia has these incredible numbers. Revenue's up 122%, and they're all important data center revenue, up 154% to 26.3 billion. And yet the stock falls 4%, 3% on the news.
Right. Well, when you're on top, like you say, you are combating not only people who maybe want to sell, but people who are thinking, I've made so much money, it's probably a good idea to sell. And so at some point, that's where these profits get taken. And really, in order to be, and you think of these companies, Microsoft and Apple are $3 trillion companies, and they have literally had multiple lives in terms of what corporations do. They've had multiple narratives.
Yes.
Nvidia is really on another narrative with this whole AI thing, and it has gone up so far so fast because it wasn't just the extremely successful chip company we knew from years past. It's had a new narrative to add on top of that. And so you have some long-term investors that are worth a tremendous amount of money. And I imagine a lot of them are just thinking, well, the responsible thing is to, I don't know, go buy that second home or that yacht or whatever people do with that kind of money. But it's just been such a high flyer for so long now.
It was interesting that Compaq stock went up at the same time because of expectations of high sales of AI servers.
You mean Dell?
Dell, was it Dell? Okay, so downstream, the good news is slowly moving down and making people rich down there, but it's kind of leaving Nvidia behind. And one explanation was that there was a little concern that their new Hopper line. No, it's a Blackwell chip. Is that right? Yes, Blackwell
Right.
chip is being delayed a little bit. Now, I remember when Silicon Graphics announced that their product, their visual computer graphic computer was going to be delayed. All of a sudden, the bloom was off Silicon Graphics, and then eventually we know its fate. Should we be worried about this? Should we worry about this new line? They have the Hopper out there. It's incredibly successful. Being a little late on Blackwell, is that something that should concern shareholders?
I doubt it. I mean, you mentioned Silicon Graphics, which, by the way, is the perfect example of a cautionary tale, a company on top that's red hot. I mean, their computers were not only everywhere in Silicon Valley, they were in. I just recently rewatched the movie Twister and thought, Silicon Graphics pretty much peaked right there,
Yeah.
and we haven't heard from them since. And I think that it wasn't so much just being late as, yes, other companies were ready to catch up, but companies were doing with workstations what SGI was doing, but they were able to do it faster and cheaper. And nobody is there with Nvidia yet, certainly not Dell, not AMD. And everybody is still kind of dependent on the Nvidia chips. Will it hold this valuation? Who knows? But no one's caught up with it yet. And I think it's not so much, oh, look, we're late with a certain set. I think the big concern for Nvidia is, will everybody continue to need these chips? And, just as you and I speak, it looks like OpenAI is due for another funding round to value it at, I don't know, something crazy like $110 billion or something. And so, okay, the frothiness is still there for AI. Were that to go away, I think that would hit Nvidia's bottom line before, I don't know, a slightly weak forecast or a slightly late chipset. They're just that far ahead right now.
Well, I know two companies that are very interested right now in getting OpenAI and the chips underneath it, and that's Apple and Nvidia of all things. I mean, it kind of goes around, but we've already had Microsoft invest enormous sums of money into OpenAI, and now it looks like Apple and Nvidia are in talks to be part of this new $100 billion round. They want to
Yeah,
get hands on those chips too.
it's a good way of putting it to say it goes around. I mean, both of those companies stand to benefit from OpenAI's success, right? Apple has already said we're going to use OpenAI on our iPhones with this Apple Intelligence that they're rolling out. And then NVIDIA obviously benefits because the more we speed up ChatGPT and the more powerful these AI engines are and all this machine learning is, well, then, NVIDIA does well because more chips are bought. So, yeah.
So it looks like Apple is looking at bolting ChatGPT onto its existing project in AI too at different levels. One level is going to be human language and writing and that sort of thing, and the other one's going to be like beefing up Siri and things like that. Does that sound right?
Right.
I mean,
This Apple and
we're going to do this ourselves, and all of a sudden, boom, they're taking. It looks like it's going to be like 30% of OpenAI. I mean, that's a pretty big commitment to another company as a supplier.
right, but I think they want that supply. When I was at the launch event of this Apple Intelligence just a few months ago, they said OpenAI was going to be on board. ChatGPT was going to be part of this, and admitting perhaps that their own internal Siri had just not been able to keep up with what people were asking of and demanding of their phones. And so they were saying, okay, well, we saw the demo of ChatGPT from OpenAI, and that's what we want to do. And remember, when that demo came out, aside from all the Scarlett Johansson controversy that got the headlines, was a sense that Siri was really plan B, plan C, plan D at this point and needed to be upgraded. And Apple saying, okay, we're going to call this AI Apple Intelligence, but we're going to use what's already out there via companies like OpenAI.
Okay, well, now the other big story this week was Pavel Durov, the Russian-born billionaire that created and runs the social messaging app Telegram. And by the sounds of a very interesting story, he was supposed to go to France to have dinner with President Macron, and he flew in on his personal jet. And he apparently was a little worried about things, but he figured it was okay if he was going to go see the president of the country. Met and arrested on the runway, and he was indicted, and I think he's been out on bail now. But this is a wild story, and it goes back to the notion that the EU has, but apparently, particularly the French, that social platforms are being misused, not just for information, but for criminal activities. But there's also a theory like they're working up the food chain to finally get to Elon.
Well, that I don't know. It does sound a bit entrapping when you put it that way. But you're right about Europe and the EU and especially France when it comes to social media. And what I found interesting was we had the Durov situation and Mark Zuckerberg's note, talking about how well we were, pushed by the Biden administration to, recommend responsible ways of getting vaccinations on COVID. It was a really odd week for social media.
Wasn't that weird about Zuckerberg? It was also visually weird because we're used to the old Zuckerberg with the short cropped hair and the robot Zuckerberg saying, no, this never happened, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden we get this new, curly haired surfer Zuckerberg saying, oh yeah, they twisted my arm and I'll never do that again. And it was like, interesting timing, interesting transformation of the speaker. I mean, why right now? Unless he's trying to keep the French off his back.
Right. And that's the only thing that I can think of as to the right now. It just didn't really make sense. We're in the heart of a presidential election where both sides are claiming, oh, social media is out to get us and the media is out to get us. And you'd think that a Mark Zuckerberg figure and Facebook and Meta in general would want to stay out of this. Instead, bringing up, well, years ago, we were pressured by the administration to do what? To be responsible and to moderate so that misinformation was not on the site. It was just an odd thing to say and an odd thing to do. And the timing, given Duroff, given what's going on, constantly with X and Elon Musk, it just like those social media guys just cannot stand to have the spotlight not be on them for even a moment, it seems.
Yeah. By the way, I think the Hunter Biden thing had something to do with that. The fear is if the Trump administration returns, there's going to be hell to pay over the Hunter Biden laptop. And I think they might be trying to get out in front of that before it happens.
You're right. He did acknowledge that. And he said, because that was so controversial, they downplayed it a bit while they investigated it, which again seems like a responsible thing to do for a social media site. I mean, look, what are we journalists told to do? Make sure if you're going to put something on Facebook or Twitter that it's true, that it's verifiable. Before you retweet something, make sure it's true. And it sounds like that's what Facebook was doing at that time, which is not censorship. I mean, if I am told something and I don't post it because I want to make a couple of calls first, that's not censorship. That's responsible journalism. And I just think both sides are really quick to jump on what these social media companies are doing, even when they're doing something that really on the face of it sounds responsible.
Now, let me throw one other thing into this, which was, and I was really on the side of Duroff and Telegram and free speech and all that. But then I read an interesting story that there's a heck of a lot of sex crime, digital sex crimes taking place in, of all places, South Korea. And it's all being done on Telegram. And that's an interesting wrinkle I hadn't thought of. Somewhere on the other side of the world, out of the EU, but it apparently is becoming quite a mess over there.
Right. And that was I don't know if I want to use the word interesting. That was the eye-opening thing about reading about Telegram over the last few days is there were some people who were saying, gosh, this is just a private way to send legitimate messages. What's going on here? And then there were those who were comparing it to sort of the dark side of Silk Road. Remember how that ended up being, criminal and they arrested Ross and I mean, not to get too deep in the woods in Silk Road, but to say this started to be a bit dark webbish. And therefore you can understand how, especially in the EU, they'd want to crack down on this. So I think there's more that we have to learn about what was going on there. And if this is really prosecution of a crime or just trying to sort of pull someone off because they're worried about what he may do in the future.
Yeah. And, arresting the guy at Le Bourget Airport as he's climbing out of his private jet. It's a little bit theatrical, don't you think? Don't you think they just could have sent him a warrant?
It's a little like a Occupy Wall Street dream kind of thing.
Yes. Okay, Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been trading in a range of between like 50,000 and 72,000 for several months now. But there's some theories out there that with the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates, Bitcoin's about to take another jump again. You've been hearing that?
I mean, goodness, there's so many rumors running.
There's an unprecedented level of open interest rates and futures on Bitcoin and all that. Like everybody's kind of feeling like they're kind of at the starting line, getting ready to jump when the gun goes off.
But isn't that the case every day? The Bitcoin moves have been 5 and 6%, which means like $3,000 or $4,000 a day. Which, I mean, imagine if a precious metal or something, consistent, and that'd be crazy. And yet that's why you have to be careful with Bitcoin, because one day it's going to be 65, the next day it's 57, then it goes back up. And I don't know that it's been moving so much in tandem with Wall Street in a long time. And therefore, would interest rates really, I don't know. It seems like when times are good and people have mad money, they're going to go into crypto. But we really haven't seen, and you and I have talked about this, we haven't seen a prolonged downturn in many years. But if we do, I wonder if the appetite for Bitcoin would be so strong, or if people would say, "Whoa, I've got to pay the rent. I'm not going to buy crypto."
I think people get bored too. I mean, it's been sitting within these guardrails for 90 days. And, playing in crypto, you really are not a person who's real patient by nature. And I think they just want to bust out. And they might be using the interest rates as an excuse. I'm not sure how they fit together, but yeah. Okay. Google. Speaking of AI, and we did Apple. Now Google is going to let its Gemini subscribers create custom chat box that serve as anything from a gym. This sounds like they just came up with a list of crazy ideas and hope that somebody buys into them. But gym buddy, cooking partner, writing editor. Yeah, I like one of those and more. And they're going to call them gems. And these are distinct personalities and specialties by just describing a set of instructions. So if you want to write a novel, you don't want gems, but if you're like cooking dinner and you want to know what the next ingredient is, sounds like that's where Google's going.
There's this whole push towards AI being friendly, and obviously the Scarlett Johansson movie is the sort of touchstone for that. But there's an entire company, and I just interviewed the CEO. It's called Friend, and they want to, you wear something around your neck, and when you need a little word of inspiration, you talk to it, and it gets to know you and gives you a positive response. These little things that follow you around and your AI friends. I just don't know. And Google's really taking a risk here, because remember the last time they had to actually pull a product because it got so many historical details embarrassingly wrong. And just think of the potential embarrassment if you have this with you all the time. I don't know. I just think it's trying to be a cuddly consumer product before it's figured out how to be a back-end machine product that it was really meant to be. And that's going to take some time. And I think the more we try to force this into our private lives, the more embarrassing it's going to be.
I see the next movie with your little buddy right here saying, rob that liquor store.
It'll be the devil on the other shoulder.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, Apple has announced the date of its big event. It'll be September 9th, 10 in the morning. And its tagline is, "It's glow time." Do you have any idea what "it's glow time" means? That sounds like a dinner party or something, or a wedding, or who knows.
Yeah, I go to these things all the time, and they're not dinner parties, believe me. But this is where we're going to see the iPhone 16, and the iPhone 16 is supposed to be just loaded with AI. The last time it was, Cook rolling out, this is what Apple Intelligence is maybe going to look like, and now we'll see it in real hardware form. And I'm eager to see what Apple does, because if you're Google or certainly OpenAI and some of these other companies, you can experiment. Look, Google proved that it can get AI embarrassingly wrong and still stay afloat as a $2 trillion company, and sort of back off and say, well, we make a lot of money with search and we're okay. If Apple gets an iPhone wrong, that's bad. And so I want to know what Apple is going to do to really put AI in everybody's pocket, which is kind of an exciting thought, maybe.
Yeah.
But also maybe. Do it smoothly, as Apple is known to do, and not embarrassingly. And I think this is going to be the first big test of what so many companies are trying to do, which is to make AI a consumer product, not just a work product, but something we want with us all the time. Will that just be a revamped, better Siri? Maybe. Will it be something mind-blowing? I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see. And the whole glow thing is probably because, I don't know, maybe your phone will glow when you, hey, Apple, or whatever you do to it to, trigger
maybe
the AI.
It's that exciting new bronze color.
Right, that'll be glow time.
Oh, the 16 and 16 plus, another piece of exciting news that only, iPhone lovers will appreciate is they're changing the lenses from horizontal to vertical, I believe, on the back. But
Hmm.
Pro and Pro Max will still have the three lens setup. So you can base your future existence on those fundamental changes.
It's funny you say that, but there are times when even if someone holds up the back of their phone, I know what phone they have
Yes,
because of where those circles are.
I know.
And I
I
guess that's a pretty nerdy flex right there. But yeah, that's how I can tell sometimes.
Okay. Well, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area, including a few minutes from when we're recording. And hear me regularly on the BBC World Radio show Business Matters. Have a great Labor Day weekend, and we'll see you next week. Take care.